All right, today we're going to tackle a really wild idea in biology. What if life isn't this perfect clockwork machine we imagine it to be? What if, deep down, it actually thrives on chaos, on instability, and even on random noise? Let's dive in.
You know, we love using mechanical metaphors for biology, right? Genes are blueprints, cells are factories. But what if that's just completely the wrong way to look at it? What if life isn't predictable and pristine at all, but something way more fluid, way more sensitive, and honestly way more creative?
Okay, so this whole thing really boils down to two totally different ways of thinking. The old equilibrium view saw life as this closed, stable system, like a wind-up toy that eventually just runs down and stops. But the new dynamical view sees it more like a whirlpool, an open system that's constantly sucking in energy just to maintain its amazing complexity, a system that thrives on change. And you know, this idea of moving away from the life as a machine model, it's not some brand new thing. For more than 100 years, scientists have been realizing that this old-school static view just doesn't cut it when you're talking about the messy, dynamic reality of being alive.
I mean, think about it. Way back in the 1930s, they already had a word for this, Fließgleichgewicht, which is just a great word that means flowing balance. The idea was that a cell isn't a solid object. It's a stable pattern that only exists because there's a constant stream of energy and material flowing right through it. It's a vortex.
Okay, so that leads us right into the really cool stuff, the nonlinear world. This is where we run into two mind-bending concepts, self-organization and nonlinearity. And trust me, this is where it gets really wild. First up, self-organization. This is basically the magic of biology. I mean, it's how you can get these mind-blowingly complex structures, like an entire embryo or a massive flock of birds, with no one in charge, no central blueprint calling the shots. Order just kinda appears out of a bunch of simple local rules. And there's this classic physics experiment that shows this perfectly, the Barnard instability. You take a thin layer of water, you heat it gently from below. At first, nothing. It's just a boring pan of water. But then you hit a specific temperature, a critical point, and bam! The random jiggling of all those water molecules suddenly synchronize, and this gorgeous, perfect honeycomb pattern appears out of nowhere. The order creates itself.
All right, the other piece of this puzzle is something called nonlinearity. Think of it like this. In a simple linear system, you push it a little, it moves a little. Makes sense, right? But living systems, they're nonlinear. And that means a tiny, tiny little push can unleash a massive, system-wide avalanche of change. So, how powerful are we talking here? Well, get this. In one study, scientists took a biochemical network and changed an input signal by just 8%. Tiny, right? Well, the network's output didn't change by 8%. It exploded by nearly 200%. That's not a small change. That is a massive amplification. So this crazy amplification power, it lets cells do something absolutely crucial, create biological switches. With just a little tweak to a feedback loop, a cell can create a system that has two and only two stable states. It's either definitely on or it's definitely off. There's no in-between. And that bistability is how cells make decisions and lock them in.
So you've got these switches, you've got this massive amplification, but this whole nonlinear thing, it also leads us somewhere that, well, sounds a little scary. The hidden logic of chaos. And this is so important, because when we hear the word chaos, we just think total random mess, right? But that's not what it is. True chaos, scientific chaos, actually has this deep, beautiful, hidden structure. As the quote says, it's built on a skeleton of infinite unstable periodic behaviors. It's complex order, not just disorder.
Okay, so this leads to a pretty obvious question. If chaotic systems are so sensitive, you know, the whole butterfly effect thing, where one tiny flap of a wing can change everything, doesn't that make them completely impossible to control?
And here's the twist. That incredible sensitivity, that's not the problem. That's actually the key to controlling it. You don't fight the chaos with brute force, you guide it. The analogy they use is perfect. It's like trying to balance a baseball on a saddle. It's a naturally unstable spot, but with tiny, smart little nudges, you can keep it right there. You use the instability to your advantage.
And this is not just some abstract idea. They've actually done this. Back in 1992, in a famous experiment, scientists took rabbit heart tissue that was beating chaotically, just like in a dangerous arrhythmia. The rhythm was all over the place. But by applying these tiny, carefully timed electrical pulses, they were able to gently nudge the system's own chaotic dynamics and steer it back into a stable, healthy heartbeat. It's incredible. They literally used chaos to fix chaos.
Okay, so life uses instability. It thrives on the edge. But the story gets even weirder. What if biology also harnesses something we spend all our time trying to get rid of? What if it uses random noise?
This brings us to a phenomenon that sounds completely made up, but I promise you, it's real. It's called stochastic resonance. The concept is totally backward, but it boils down to this. Sometimes, adding a little bit of random noise to a system can actually help it detect a really faint signal that it would have otherwise missed. It makes no sense, but it works.
And of course, nature figured this out a long time ago. Take the crayfish. It has these little hairs on its tail that sense tiny vibrations in the water, like from a predator swimming nearby. In the dark, a faint vibration might be too weak to trigger a nerve impulse. But when there's daylight, the light itself adds a little bit of random noise to the nervous system, and that little bit of noise is just enough to lift the weak predator signal over the neuron's firing threshold. It's amazing. The noise literally helps the crayfish see in the dark, so to speak.
So, okay, let's pull all these threads together. You've got self-organization, nonlinearity, chaos, noise. When you combine all of this, what you end up with is a completely new and honestly a much more exciting way to think about how life actually works.
And this isn't just some neat theory for a textbook. It's changing everything. In medicine, we're talking new ways to handle dynamical diseases like epilepsy and arrhythmias. In genetics, we're realizing that random fluctuations aren't mistakes. They're a feature that helps species adapt. And for neuroscience, it's a whole new framework for understanding the brain, not as a computer, but as this complex, self-organizing, dynamical system.
Which really leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. Life's genius seems to be its ability to live right on that edge, to harness instability, to turn chaos and noise into tools. So, if that's how life works, what are we missing by always striving for perfect order and perfect control in everything we build and everything we do?